Toro is going to open our meeting for us. Karakia.
Tēnā rā tātou mea te kia koutou te whara mai tēnei rā. Me ino e tātou. Au e roi o matakoreku e te rata te hoa tungata hāhangi te kino te tino a te whai. E karangara ki koe te teke te pono te Gloria e tino te hārawa te matatū te pūma mutinga. E karanga mātau e hui mui e koe, arena mātau koro, arena mātau pātai, arena mātau whakaro, e tūtiki pai te kaupapa I tēnei rā. Amen.
Thank you, Toro. Now, I just want to clarify that we do have a quorum. Have we established we have a quorum, James?
That's been fucking on. Yes, I believe so.
Okay, we do.
So?
We have 15 of 18. We need 75%.
Only got 14.
Then we'll commence. Are there...
Generally, Mr. Chairman, Tanya is here, but she doesn't get here till 10.
No.
I didn't count them.
We're at 83.3%.
6, 8. Oh, hang on.
Did you count Alan?
An irrational number.
Alan's here.
2, 4, 6, 12.
Okay,
No, we've got 14 because I counted Mike. 14's okay?
Yep.
So I don't count.
14 over 18. Well, let's just check the maths.
more than 75. And Tanya's thing's beeping while you're doing it.
77.7778.
Have a call.
We're 2.7% above what we need. Like a point share, I have to leave at 2:30.
And that's okay. So we have we don't have any notices because we've got a very specific topic we're discussing this meeting. Apologies, Councillor Barker is leaving at what time?
2:30.
2:30. Fenton?
I have a doctor's appointment from 10:30 to 11:30. I'll be back.
He might not let you come back.
If it's that bad, I might not come back.
I have to go at midday to Wellington, however, I'm not part of the voting quorum.
We've got a doctor's appointment in Wellington, have you? That's serious.
You know what I'll tell you about in the wharepapa.
Corona,
I have to leave at 3:30.
3:30, with evidence.
Corona be here at 15:15.
Jenny?
Doctor's appointment at 12:50.
Well, we're all crook here.
It's actually to do with checking that everything's okay.
And Corona, we have an apology from Corona, and Tanya is not here until the 10 o'clock flight, is it? Oh, click. Yeah, Tanya will be a bit late. Those are all the apologies. Well, that's more than we normally have. So, do we have someone to move the apologies, please? Fenton, Uppy, second. All those in favour? All right. Are there any conflict of interest declarations?
Conflicted all the time.
Been a few conflicts, but not of interest. Therefore, we'll move on. So, firstly, we've got two sets of minutes to confirm. One on the 2nd of May, which will have a copy, and the other one was on the 20th of June. We'll take the ones on the 2nd of May first. Have everyone read these for correctness?
I'll move.
Toro will move. Do we have a seconder? Looking around, Paul Bailey will second. Thank you very much, Paul. All those in favour?
Aye.
The minutes. Bailey. Councillor Bailey. So the minutes of the 20th of June for correctness. We okay? Therefore, do we have a mover? Toro again. Toro will move again.
I can't, I wasn't there.
Hey, you weren't there. They're looking. Uppy will second them. All those in favour? Against? Thank you very much. So we'll move to a single decision item that we have today. And before we do so, I want to invite Joella and Zan up. Can you come up, please? And as they are coming up, I just want, these are two people who gave up their time and volunteered to be part of this tank process, and they have been, so they're not professionals like our staff, they're not paid by the sources. So I just want them to say, have a little 2 minutes each before we proceed with the professional side of this. Not that they're not professional, but the getting into the nuts and bolts of this. And before they do, I just want to say that I had the great pleasure of going to several of the tank meetings, and they've been going on for 6 years, as many of you know, and I think these two have been involved for right through that process. And just to see the hard work and dedication that went on there, and the commitment, and the fact that a group of people from very diverse backgrounds and very diverse think processes came together and didn't know each other in the beginning, and got to know each other and got to like each other. And that was manifested last week when we get the thank you to them. It was a tremendous thing to see how these people had got to know each other and liked each other, even though they didn't agree on everything, and still don't agree on everything, as you will have seen in your papers. They agreed on one really important thing, and that is that we need to move forward in a much better way than we have done it in the past, that we need to look after our environment much better than we've done in the past, that whilst we do need and acknowledge that we do need to have businesses that employs our people and keeps us into a prosperous society, in doing that we need to also protect our environment. So there was, I guess there's slightly different views on how we go about doing that, but there was no doubt about they all agreed on that single point. So I'd just like to thank these two in particular, but no more than the others that were there that also gave up hugely of their time, and give them time, 2 minutes to comment to you. So, Joella, would you like to start?
Kia ora, ko Joella Brown ahau, no Hiratanga ahau, ko Kahurana ki tuku maunga, ko Ngāti Pōporo tuku hapu. Kia ora to the council staff, and to our rangatira. I've been involved in the tank plan, not quite for the whole duration of it, but if I put it this way, the way I keep putting it to Tom, in the time we've been in tank, I've managed to get pregnant, have a baby, breastfeed, wean it, and now my baby's ready to go to school. So, I've sat in the tank process as a mana whenua rep, and in this way we've sat and acted as rangatira around a table with others that have acted in the same manner, and we've developed relationships that did not exist before this process, both with the council and with each other. And at the tank plan wind up, we enjoyed a evening of thanks. So it'll be interesting to watch how you guys proceed with the plan now that you have it. So kia ora, good luck.
Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. Zan Harding. I'm a grape grower, and I've represented the Hawke's Bay wine industry through the tank process. But in doing that, I've tried to step beyond simply the interests of the wine industry in Hawke's Bay and consider the wider interests of this region and all its people. And I think that goes for most, if not all, of the members of TANC. If they didn't come into the process thinking that way, I think it was hard to leave the process without having a much broader, interconnected view of the future of land and water in Hawke's Bay. I couldn't let the 6-year TANC process with 42 formal meetings and countless hours of other subgroup meetings and work behind the scenes, I could not let that go without eyeballing you all and asking you to put whatever differences or other issues you have before you to one side and do your best to do the best you can with this TANC plan change. There is so much in there that is good and progress and could not have happened without the TANC plan change. It's not perfect. We couldn't agree on everything, but we've made a lot of progress. And for the mana whenua members here, I particularly want to point out what, from my perspective, is a real a sea change. It's I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a full change in worldview, but it's on the way towards, and the extent to which the council drafters, and particularly I want to pay tribute to Marianne Baker here as the powerhouse behind the drafting of the plan change you have here. But her, together with the treaty partners' representatives, have managed to craft something which I think is quite revolutionary, certainly for Hawke's Bay. The extent to which Māori worldview and Māori values have been able to be incorporated into this plan change, and that was possible only because of the hard work of the people I've mentioned, but not just because of that. It's because right around the TANC plan change, people from different perspectives could come together and agree on that. And that is something that you would have never achieved in front of a commissioner through a confrontational process, and it's something you could never achieve in the Environment Court as it stands today. It's a valuable thing, and it's one of many valuable features in that plan. So I hope that you can find a way to reach a decision on it, a positive one, and we can move forward with this plan as just part of an ongoing process of continuous improvement that we all have to buy into. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jayla. Really appreciate that. Mike, will you thank these people in a traditional way?
Tēnei te mihi ki au kōrua. Koutou I muri o kōrua I hera tauna, e mahi ana, e mahi pai, e mahi tino a tāhua. No reira, tēnā kōrua, tēnā kōrua.
Thank you very much. And you're really welcome to stay. I know you've probably got a bit of pruning to finish off, Zan, but as we go through the process today.
I trust you now.
One out of how many?
And you will all have read this document. Just remembering, we have the draft. When I saw the pile, there's a couple of forests that filled boxes of the discussions and the resolutions that have occurred in this process. So I will hand over to, is it Marianne we're handing to, or James? So the floor is yours, James. Do you want to sit up the front, or do you want to, with the team? Sit here. Okay.
Morena koutou, good morning, committee members. It is my privilege this morning, on behalf of the staff, both past and present, of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and the TANC Collaborative Group, to present you with the draft proposed plan change for the Greater Hiritonga area. This is a significant moment in time for the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, the Hawke's Bay community, and for the Regional Planning Committee. As you're all acutely aware, we have the culmination of 6 years of hard work, a multi-million-dollar investment, probably in the order of $5 million, science, technical, policy, participatory processes coming together in this freshwater plan change. Freshwater reform nationally is the single largest focus of regional councils. It is our epicentre of our work as an organisation because it is where land, urban and freshwater management processes all come together and have an impact on our coastal receiving environments. So it is a comprehensive piece of work managing the most heavily populated and most productive part of our region. The Resource Management Act is nearly 30 years old, and during that time there has been some successes and some progress made with respect to managing point sources and particular isolated activities. What we are endeavouring to do nationally through freshwater reform is manage the cumulative effects of human interactions with the environment and the diffuse impacts of activities that are not easily, readily identified and controlled. That makes limit setting, which we are required to do under the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, particularly complex and challenging. As if setting limits wasn't difficult enough, in this context we are required to do this in an integrative way that brings together complex hydrological systems, surface, groundwater, coastal impacts. It brings together not just the physical but also the cultural, the social, the economic, and therefore the decision-making considerations that lie now before this committee are of the utmost complexity. There is not a resource management set of decisions that this committee or any regional council in New Zealand will take that will surpass the complexity of this plan change. Its pervasive interests across the community are profound. The consequences will be long-lasting, and the gravity of the matters of which you are now going to need to weigh are great indeed. This has been a significant and historic exercise because of the extent to which it has been participatory with the community. When the Resource Management Act was enacted initially, it was born of a time where it was believed that if property rights were clearly defined, legal processes could simply be put into train that would reconcile those different rights and interests through effectively litigation. The past practice of councils in the early days of the RMA was to do what is often referred to as propose and defend. And over time, New Zealand has come to understand that that type of resource management is extraordinarily resource intensive. It works particularly well for lawyers. It doesn't work particularly well for communities. It has high transaction costs, creates a high degree of uncertainty, and makes regulators enormously risk averse about what they try to regulate and what they don't. And some of the incentives created by the Resource Management Act are considered to be the driving factors behind why councils and communities have been so reluctant to set limits and to manage activities in the way that is necessary to get the outcomes that the community aspires to. So increasingly there is a view that resource management decision making needs to be done differently. Differently in two ways, the first of which is through collaborative participatory processes. And around New Zealand, you will not find a resource management collaborative process of this breadth and scale and level of investment. This is the most significant collaborative process that has been attempted within freshwater reform, within the resource management system in this country, and it will be comparable to anything you will find around the world in its scale and comprehensiveness. So it is truly historic and significant, but enormously complex and challenging as a result. The second way in which decision-making under the Resource Management Act has profoundly changed is symbolised by this committee. The expression of Article 2 of the Treaty of Waitangi and the devolved responsibilities from the Crown to this council to work in partnership with the treaty settlement entities of this region is a new and different way of resource management decision-making occurring. And in that regard, this committee is at the absolute bleeding edge of resource management practice. You have complex limit setting, complex physical systems, you have a highly participatory process, you have integrative decision-making in which you are going to have to weigh economic, social, cultural and environmental considerations. Section 32 analysis that weighs up costs and benefits, requires you to consider various options, puts you within a planning hierarchy of national direction, regional planning document hierarchy including the regional policy statement, a whole bunch of constraints and considerations that lie around your decision making. So this is quite a navigation exercise that lies ahead for this committee. But what I want to encourage you with is that you are doing this off an incredibly strong foundation. And the credit and acknowledgement needs to go to the members of the TANK group who over the last 6 years have put in thousands of hours of voluntary time, have had to make some incredibly courageous decisions and weigh enormously complex issues, supported by a significant effort from regional council staff. And that foundation is built on a high level of understanding, information sharing, perspective sharing. And the significant thing about the collaborative process which has proceeded today, in my view, is it represents the very best of RMA decision making. The reason for that, as I mentioned at the thank you last week to the TANK group, is that when all is said and done, all the documents that we have that underpinned our decision making, the science reports, the economics reports, etc., all of those are necessary inputs. But actually what achieves success in RMA decision making, and more importantly in the implementation of RMA plans, is the community buy-in and the social capital that is built through the process that enables the community to actually deliver the outcomes. As noted in the paper that accompanies the draft plan change, this plan change is all about community ownership. Because if you have rules that the community can't buy into, can't give effect to, they don't endure. You get a political reaction, things change, and they become unenforceable or unimplementable. And the major shift with this exercise is that we have invested alongside the community over 6 years to build a plan change that has got a high level of agreement and that is one that the community can buy into and can therefore implement. So you have a plan change before you that has the very best prospects of being successful in achieving the outcomes that you're seeking. Having said that, not everything is agreed. And you will have seen in the draft plan change that there are a number of matters of which consensus could not be reached by the TANK group. I think it is important that we do not consider that to be any sign of failure. To expect 30 plus stakeholders to agree on absolutely everything and be bound by that is an unrealistic expectation. But what we do have is we have an enormous amount of the content of the plan change that is agreed. Of the 16 objectives, only part of one is not agreed. and then the majority of the policies and rules have a level of agreement. And within the areas of disagreement, there is quite a high level of refinement. So rather than bringing you a staff-drafted plan change without much of an idea about how the community will receive this, you have received a draft plan change that gives you a very, very clear view about where the most contentious matters lie and where the areas of agreement exist. And in doing so, we have accelerated your part of the process, de-risked the council's ultimate notification of the plan, hopefully significantly reduce the areas of litigation that will be costly and time-consuming to the community. And we've built social capital, partnerships and understanding across a whole range of sectors in the community that will endure for a very long time in support of the implementation of this plan. So in conclusion, we recommend this draft plan change to you for receipt today and adoption in principle. There is further decision making that lies ahead, and that is the purpose of the workshopping process that we are going to enter into after this meeting. And then we hope in the coming months that final decisions can be reached by this committee on those areas of disagreement, and we can proceed to notify this historic and significant plan change on behalf of the community of Hiritonga. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, James. Before we move to the recommendations, Marianne, do you wish to say anything to James?
Well, I couldn't really follow what James said at all well, but I did, from my personal perspective, would like to take the opportunity to say that it's really been my great pleasure in working with such a great bunch of people that sat around the tank table. They were excellent in their willingness to learn new things, to understand some of the complexities that they had to face, and they really wanted to find solutions. So it was their whole approach to the process that made it much easier to understand what they wanted in terms of the plan change. So I'd really like to give the Tank Group a lot of credit for how they helped frame and draft the plan that we hope as staff we've interpreted what they wanted accurately. And just those areas of non-consensus. I think there are three main reasons for non-consensus, and one of them is that it was incredibly complex trying to understand the relationships between the environment and what we do in the environment, water use and land use activities. And so the complexities of the issues have made it hard in some places in the plan to arrive at a solution. The other area of non-consensus was mainly around personal values and the approach to risk management. And so that meant there was not a right answer. It really relies on individual assessment as to how it meets values. So that's another reason for non-consensus. And the third one was around some of the uncertainties around knowing what will happen. Particularly in relation to a couple of the mitigation measures that have been introduced. So there's a little bit of uncertainty, well, will they work or won't they? But there was a willingness to at least give things a go. So just in summary, I think that the Tank people have been wonderful to work with and have allowed us to draft something that hopefully will be robust and, as James says, give us a different way of managing our activities in the landscape.
Thank you, Marianne. Kerry, do you want to say anything, or Tom? You're fine. Okay, so we will move. Do we have any questions about the paper which refers to the recommendations on page 12 before we move?
One thing is, we as the Tangata Whenua group and possibly councillors as well, I only got this yesterday, and I would have thought that we would have got it prior to an opportunity for the Tangata Whenua to meet, as we normally do, before our RPC meeting, so that we can go through the issues. I know it's been going 6 years, and we should be familiar with most of the material in here. However, we have also got that report from the tangata whenua, which we have not discussed as well. So I would see that the moving of a motion to receive this report is probably a bit early, and I would like it deferred till the next meeting. Been waiting 5, 6 years now, so what's another month?
Any other questions or thoughts on
And I
that?
mean, the other thing is, generally we meet at 10:30. Tania is the deputy chair of this group. She's unable to make it because she usually comes in on the 10:30 flight. So, you know, she has specifically also asked that this matter be deferred.
The recommendation be referred and we go straight into the workshop.
Yep.
James, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, Chair, that's over to the committee. The recommendations have been drafted specifically to acknowledge the fact that there is considerable work that lies ahead, to familiarise the committee with the content of the plan change and to address many of the concerns. So this was a formal part to more appropriately enable the committee to start workshopping the plan change, because it will be in formal receipt of it.
Chair, if I can just add something. To receive a report is not to make a comment on it whether you agree with it or disagree with it. You simply receive it to acknowledge that you've got it, like you picked it up out of a letterbox. You haven't opened it, haven't read it, haven't decided whether you like it or not. The next thing is you then go and do the work on the report, and at the end of that workshop, you then make a decision about the contents of it. So I just, if we were being strictly formal, if we don't receive the report, if we want to be really technical about it, you can't proceed to do the work on it.
No, you can't.
But the point is, if we put a motion to receive the report and people are going to vote against it, well, it's going to fall over. So we've got ourselves into a little bit of a bind here.
Sure.
And I just suggest that we get away from, try and get away around this and just have an informal meeting.
Well, can I just suggest that we take out the adoption principle? So receives, that way we
And the
receive, but
recommends.
adoption
I'd be
principle
happy
goes a bit further.
It does.
And I noted that earlier in the point 7, it said that that it was just to be received rather than something anyway. But yeah, if we can take out that
It does.
receipt.
For the avoidance of doubt,
Yeah.
I highlighted it.
Yeah.
So, that gives to Rick's point that we are just receiving the report, we're not making decisions on it. So point 7 is quite
If we
relevant.
take out the adoption principle, I would receive the report.
Chair, staff will be perfectly comfortable with it being received. The reason for putting adopt in principle was an acknowledgement of the Tank Group collaborative process work and the intention by this committee to honour the recommendations of that committee, of the Tank Group itself. So it was acknowledging the intent to adopt what had been recommended, subject to the caveats that are in there. But look, if there is a level of discomfort with that, then just receipt of the paper
So
would be
we've
perfectly
reduced the
sufficient.
recommendation to 1. Formally thanks past and present members of the Tank and receives report.
And 3.
You did 2 as well, but instead of adopts and principles, I thought it was suggesting just drop those first
Receives.
words.
Put on receive, yeah.
Receive,
Yeah, I'm happy to move on that basis, Chair.
Okay, so with the amendment, we have a mover. Do we have a seconder?
Clarification, Chair. What are we on? Are we doing 1, 2 and 3 together, or are we just on 1? What are we?
I'm moving 1, 2 and 3 with a change in the wording at the beginning of 2, which now would read receives the draft tank plan change rather than adopts in principle.
Just one more comment on that then, with regards to the number 2, with status subject to the committee's final decisions in relation to the identified matters of non-consensus and outstanding issues. There may be a circumstance where, with regard to the issues, may not just be limited to those non-consensus issues.
Yeah.
The review may expose that there are other issues, so therefore we need to, if we adopt that, then we don't provide for those issues. They may come out beyond the non-consensus issues that we're referring to there.
So the motion really should be simply to receive the report.
Just to receive, I'm happy to receive.
Yeah. Take the rest out. We don't want to notify it or anything.
For the horse before we
Yes.
do
Are we gonna
due
thank people?
diligence on it.
So will you,
And thank you, yeah.
will be notified?
Surely we should thank.
Peter, we remember that, we'll go back to,
So number one,
it is a valid point.
Yeah, no, I'm happy that number 2 should just read receives the draft tank plan change.
They're quite clear about that.
They want to.
Kia ora, just on number 3, there's an assumption that I don't think we should include number 3 because there's an assumption that all the reports that we need are in there. And actually, when I read through this, it says no more room for any other reports. So it's limiting and it's narrow by its very statement for number 3. So I'm actually moving that we just receive it and that's that.
And thank you.
Kia ora.
Chair, could I perhaps just provide some context to the committee? The drafting of the recommendations under number 3 and the second parts of number 2 were deliberate in terms of narrowing the scope of the committee's deliberations from here. And again, that was intended to support the spirit of the intent with setting the tank group in motion as a community collaborative process for 6 years with hundreds of thousands of hours of volunteer time on the basis that the committee was being empowered to do the work and that the focus of this committee would be on those matters that are unresolved and wouldn't be seeking to commission a whole new body of work or seeking to relitigate any of those recommendations from the committee. That's just by way of context and background. It is within the gift of this committee to depart from that intended process, but that's why they were drafted in the way that they were.
Paul?
Thank you, Chair. It's my strong view that if we were to attempt to relitigate the consensus decisions that the tank group came to, then we might as well not have had tank group in the first place. At the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, we're here to discuss the issues that for which consensus was not reached. I thought and understood from paragraph 12 that had been agreed to by the tank group itself, and it was part of their terms of reference that where decisions had been made, consensus had been reached, that the council was going to accept those as that's what they are, and that we weren't going to relitigate them through this process. Perhaps James may wish to elaborate on that.
Well, actually, Peter, you attended the tank meetings. Is that your thinking around that?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I've never received the report. I had no notice that these minutes had come out. The office hadn't called. The original was how I felt at the very beginning, because there was a law being made, got held up by Labor, so I don't know. I've never seen the act, but it changed and brought in collaboration. Even though we sat on the last, Liz and I are probably the only two in here that have worked on Generation 2 plan, the current operative. It really does. You're almost allowing the community to make the rules, to really, really make the rules. Well, isn't it this committee here that should be checking it all to ensure? It brings up a real, well, I see it as a nightmare in there, because you don't know who was in the group, what they were given, and what the outcome would be. It's no different than being a cook, baking. Those are the ingredients thrown in, that's what's coming out the end. So I hope it does answer those queries. I thought we were going to get it. We would then look at it and see what the community wanted, and then we'd have to fine-tune quite a bit of it. That's the way I took it right from the beginning.
So you were saying we know more than the community?
I would say if the community knew more than us, then they should be sitting around this table and not us.
Well, we have a little bit of a stalemate here, don't we? So we want to relitigate every point.
No, I don't mean re-litigate all the points. Is to have a look at it and see what the judgment was. This has been driven by the scientists and everyone else, same as the second generation was. But there are many in here have not read it because we've had to stay away from tank. Appear there but don't input into it. And because some of us have done that, it puts us out on a limb. At what we know it should have happened hasn't really been looked at.
Okay, look, I'm going to, I absolutely incredibly disagree with you, but I'm going to move on this. I want a resolution that we receive this report and we thank the participants of this report and we'll receive it and then we'll argue about how we go forward from there. So we just want a simple resolution. We've got to get through this. We've got to receive it and thank the people.
If I would offer, Chair, that we just, we take 1 and 2 as one motion and then take 3 separately. That would...
1 and 2.
Take 1 and 2. That's thanking and receiving. And then...
Sorry?
I think you've got it right.
Yeah, no, I don't...
You've got consensus at this point in time, so...
Yeah, I think if we, it's all little word changing, Paul, and we can get across the table that we thank everyone and we receive the report. Yep. We can have a little win today, and we need a little win just to kick us off. Kenton?
I just wondered if we could insert thank past, present members of TANK and regional council staff in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be the only addition.
Everyone would be happy with that.
Yeah.
Peter, you're good at wordsmithing these.
Well, so correct me if I'm wrong from this conversation, but we are now not going to move 3 at all. We're only going to move.
We're just going to move
1 with the addition of thanks for the staff, and 2 receives the draft tank plan change. Full stop.
Yep.
Yes. Are we going to publicly notify?
You could do something with 3.
On 3.
So, Chair, the question of public notification is one which will come to a formal meeting of the committee in the fullness of time once the workshopping's been completed. The point of those recommendations under 3 was to give staff direction about what work to now go away and do. Now, some of that's required by legislation anyway, so we can work on the assumption that in progressing this plan change that they will be required and we can get on and do them. I guess we'll get some guidance over the next 2 days as the extent to which there are matters which may have been subject to consensus by the TANK group that some members of this committee now want some further information on or wish to review. We had been, in the interests of efficiency, particularly after 6 years of hard work, been trying to focus the effort now on the home straight. Rather than going back too many steps.
Well, James, we're not sure how far we're going to go back. We just have, I think Matu was saying, in principle, we are able to, but it doesn't say we would necessarily do that. And I think that's blowing in the wind at the moment. So let's get these 2 resolutions passed. So what do they look like? Do we need to? I think
one resolution is in 2 parts.
1 resolution in 2 parts. Sorry. Thank you for correcting my consigliere.
Which is?
Yeah, we just I think we need to be really clear what we are saying.
Well, let's do them 1 at a time.
There's only 1.
There is only 1.
The second one was 2.
There it is there. Formally thank past and present APR staff and members of the TANK collaborative group, individual collective contributions. That's the 1, and the 2 is receive the tank plan change. That's it.
It's all. Yep.
We have a mover. Peter was.
Evan did.
Atua, thank you very much. Anyone got any comments?
No comment. Just a brief one from me, Chair. As you all know, this has been 6 years of incredible work and in a very resource-hungry matter, it's got to be said. And I want to acknowledge also not only those members of staff and the stakeholder group that attended those meetings, but also a couple of people sitting around this table, in particular Peter Paku and Tom Belford, who also attended many of the meetings as observers and contributors to the process. Just going back to the conversation we just had about where our focus should be and what our terms of reference is, I recall quite distinctly the discussion around this matter of the tank plan change and the matter of decisions that were made by tank or recommended to us by consensus. And I do remember at the time there was considerable reluctance upon members of this committee to agree that if they received a consensus decision that they would adopt it without the opportunity to change it. And that is the reality of the situation we have. It always worried me considerably that we'd asked a whole lot of stakeholders to sit around the table for many, many years and agree on something only for this committee to overturn it. But that is this committee's right, and they have the power to do so. I would like to think that we will focus our attention in the matters before us over the next 2 days and further ahead on those things where there was not consensus, so that we can get a sensible and operative plan that will benefit this community.
Yeah, fair enough.
Mr. Chairman.
Just one Matu, do you wish to speak as a seconder? Matu, do you wish to speak as a seconder?
Pardon?
Do you wish to speak further as a seconder?
Yes.
Yeah. We'll speak to it now. And then Tom will come to you.
Yeah, I second the motion, but just clarification with regard to our comments on with regard to the issues may not be limited to the non-consensus issues. There's no intention whatsoever to undermine the process of the tank. Hence why I put my hand up to second and thank them for that. It's just being more responsible to our constituencies from our tangata whenua groups with regard to we still need to have the conversation to better understand the draft. As I said, we've only just received it. We need to go through a review process. We're also meeting with the tangata whenua groups in the next few weeks. So, it's just allowing that time to make sure that we are making the right decisions. That's all we're asking for.
I understand. Thank you. Tom.
I have a question first. Once we vote on this, are we concluding the official meeting?
Yes.
The workshop that will then be held could play a role in securing the buy-in from the community that has been talked about. 35 or so people, a variety of observers and hangers-on and so forth, have had the privilege, if you want to call it that, of absorbing a lot of information over a number of years. And have gotten to a point where they have identified significant areas of consensus and so forth. And if we wished that kind of consensus to emerge in the community at large, I would argue it would behoove us that the workshopping we do around this, while conducive to enabling more informal discussion, which I would support, does not necessarily need to happen in private. And so what is the intent as far as the further conduct of this discussion?
A very good point.
So look, Chair, that's over to the committee to determine. Mrs. Lambert's just checking now with the webcaster to see whether he is available to continue webcasting this, if that is the wish of the committee.
I would suggest that it should be the wish of this committee, but I guess that's for further discussion. In the event that we choose to deal with these issues behind closed doors for some reason, even though there were dozens and dozens of people involved in this process up till now. I would just remind you on page 113 of the commitment that this committee made to the tank process. The Regional Planning Committee has agreed to have particular regard to any tank consensus outcome if one emerges, and the Regional Council has given a good faith undertaking to implement the recommendations of the tank group. That's the understanding that all of those people spent their thousands of hours operating within. Hopefully none of them are watching yet this morning to see how close we are coming to undercutting that commitment.
Paul, we'll just deal with this resolution moment because Mike will come back to that, Tom. We will get a view on that. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm supportive of Councillor Belford's suggestion that this the workshop be held in public. That everyone's, there's no reason why we shouldn't be transparent about what we were going on this. I'm hugely supportive of collaborative processes. I think that they're a much better way, a really good way of getting a feel for what the community wants looking forward into the future. But the key to collaborative processes is we have delegated that responsibility to that collaborative process, and we have to accept consensus decisions that have been made. Otherwise, like I've said before, is what's the point in going through all that process? But I'm also really pleased in paragraph 18 of the paper to see that anyone who, whilst a consensus may have been reached, if anyone had any concerns, the tank group was happy for members to advocate through formal submission process of minor technical clarifications. I think that's a really useful release valve. And I'd also like to point out in paragraph 21, which I think is another really good outcome, that even those points where consensus wasn't reached, the point that was in dispute has been narrowed down to a much lower level than what it possibly could have been. So it gives us a good steer of where we have to make our decision within certain bounds. So I'm really pleased with that. And I think the whole tank process, I attended a couple of meetings just to see how the whole process was operating. And I was really comfortable that everyone that was sitting around the table was having a fair crack of the whip. So I'm happy to proceed as we are.
Hey, Paul, are there any other speakers to the motion? Yes.
Yeah. Just as governors, we should receive material in a timely manner so that we can digest it and make it the right decision. So I think this is probably an issue in regard to the couriers that this organisation uses. Sometimes we get our packs the day after the meeting. So I've asked that my material be kept at the office, at the desk. When I went to get it yesterday, I got last month's stuff. So, what I'm saying is that out of respect for the people who have done all this work, we should at least have the chance to go through it in a timely manner. I spent a lot of time yesterday looking at it, but you do these issues, you also need to be thinking about it. As governors, we had to separate ourselves from the process and not get too involved in what was going on with Tank. So this is our chance to actually see the final report and give it the dues that it should be given.
Thank you, Tora. Any other speakers?
Yeah, just a comment.
Yes, Jenny.
I acknowledge and I applaud the efforts of Tank of trialling a different way to collaborate and engage. Engari, the Mana Whenua Caucus, the Māori Caucus, also have due diligence and responsibilities to collaborate with and to work with their groups. So this is the challenge that we have, that we actually have to collaborate with our own constituencies in that. And I know that there's been a lot of people involved, but it's a small proportion of our constituencies. So we have to give that due diligence above all else, because that's why we're here, as part of that. And I would welcome public televising this process, because it'll start to build a bridge about understanding what that means. So it's not to be difficult. It's just the collaborative responsibilities and due diligence of our constituencies are what's driving us to ask for this. Nothing more, nothing less. Kia ora.
Thank you. Welcome, Tania.
Kia ora.
Okay, are there any more speakers? Otherwise, we'll put the motion. We have a mover and a seconder. The amended motion, which is up there now. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I believe something should be done with 3, with some amendment to take into account the reservations that have been expressed. I believe something should be done with it to give direct staff in a path forward, and to ensure that appropriate steps are taken to move this on its way. The reservation expressed that this list might be exclusive and prevent the committee looking at other issues that it wants to, can simply be resolved by adding on the bottom 3 something to the effect that this list may be amended or added to with items that the committee deems necessary for further investigation.
Yeah.
But it means we can carry on. We can move forward.
But James did point out we can carry on anyway.
Sorry?
James did point out we can carry on anyway.
Well, I'm sure they will carry on anyway, but I think they should carry on with some sanction and some decided process.
Certainly would be our preference to have the committee formally commissioning the work which is outlined, but as I said before, on the basis that most of it's required under statute, we will box on either way. Have no problems with a suggestion such as that from Councillor Dick.
Rick, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm actually really anxious. It's taken us 3/4 of an hour to receive a report and thank someone. At this rate of progress, I'm going to have to wipe off the next 6 months of my life. I have to say, these are 2 really simple tasks we should have simply done. And the atmosphere around the room is causing me huge concern. I just feel like I should just walk out the room, come back in a week's time and say, what have you guys done? That's where I'm at. We're not going to get through this if this is the way we're going to approach everything. With high levels of suspicion, high levels of technicality and all the rest of it, we are not going to get through this. My view is that I agree with Alan to an extent. It's good to have something to send the staff a message that we want them to get on with things, but in a way which is not exclusive or stopping people doing other things later. That's the point about it. And it's just this. I would consider this to be just simply a business as usual direction to staff to get on and do things we want. I accept Victoria's point. The material came late, but I accept Matthew's caution. But I still feel we should be able to say, look, staff, the things we want you to do, need to do. Here's the authority. Go ahead and do them, and you report to us later. And if we like what they've done, we'll accept it. If we want to add things in, we'll do that.
I'll move 3 with that addition.
We can look at anything. Yeah.
That it be not exclusive. The list above be not exclusive. What things on it, we can do it.
The last wording that you had, Alan, just to make sure that.
Well, I can't remember exactly what I said, but Rick's summation probably says it a lot. Yeah. Precisely that the list is not exclusive, and that other matters may be investigated should the committee decide.
Yeah, okay. Just add a 3.7 other matters raised by the committee.
We have a mover. We're taking the second recommendation now. Mover, do we have a seconder? You'll second that?
Yes, I was just going to we actually discussed that with regard to the concerns in the first one, and we did provide for number 3 to carry on with regard to a suggested amendment, and I'll give it to Councillor Allen. If you can go back to 3 point, go back up to 3.2, please, 3.1. The outstanding areas of non-consensus. So if we were to add in any other areas that may be identified by the tangata whenua or council members of the RPC following the workshop on the 13th of August. And it's more or less just saying highlight.
But he's more about we give staff clear direction. So if we can add it into this number 3, that would really help.
That's what he's doing.
That's what he's done.
Oh, so he's done. Oh, sorry.
The printing out has got a bit confused, but what you had it spot on.
Okay. Rightio.
And you need to...
I read it right.
Oh, sorry.
No, just reread it. You need
Okay,
to pause on this.
we'll read. Pause on this. So go back to... Sorry, I'll just find where I am here.
You've put your insertion a little bit early in the
Yep.
sentence. Earlier.
Just add the word "and." Where the cursor is. That's it.
Me confused where I am.
Just a reminder of our previous meeting. The Māori caucus put a recommendation for a report around tank, and it was thwarted and pretty much obstructed. So, and there was not enough at that meeting for a full quorum, but did put that recommendation to the members that were here, because there was a tangi on, if you remember. And it was supported, and we never got a report on that. So that's why I'm mindful about this. We never got a report from a recommendation that was supported by the current members that were here at the last meeting.
Mr Chairman, the rest of those that have been crossed out, they come back in.
Yeah, they come back in. Yeah.
Everything comes back in.
Just to put it in so we can all see it, and then put and any other area.
That was just the thing. And that was just aligning with our further.
A 3-2 stays in, doesn't it? Yeah. And the section 32 stays in.
You need to take out that first bit of the...
Outstanding
It's 3
areas.
letters.
Yeah.
You added an extra bit in there that should be taken back out.
Take out of the RPC following this. See, it should read like that. The outstanding areas of the.
What you added in initially that got my right. Let's go back to what Tanya gave you, but take out that first bit you added in.
So the 3.1 should read the outstanding areas of non-consensus and any other areas that may be identified by the tangata whenua or council members of the RPC following the workshop on the 13th of August.
Yeah, we'll just leave out the date.
Just for clarity, is that a sort of amendment to the terms of reference in the voting? Because you're effectively splitting the RPC. I mean, the RPC is the RPC. It is made up of council members and tangata whenua members.
Yep.
But if you make a decision, you've got a voting decision. So if you split it out, you've actually effectively created two subcommittees of the RPC.
Yeah, but this is simply a request. So what we're suggesting is that a request may come from the tangata whenua members, or it may come from the councillors,
Why don't we just say members of the committee?
or any members of the committee.
Yeah, that's the point. That we're one committee, we're not two parts of one
Well,
committee.
otherwise we have to convene a meeting
and then have everybody agree to commission a report or further information. If the tangata whenua members say, hey, look, we need further clarification on this and we'd like a report on that, I think we should be able to ask for it. We're only trying to get more information. Otherwise, we have to convene a meeting, get a resolution on what we want to report on, and then you do it.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I mean, I think in terms of the matter that Jenny Nelson-Smith just raised, I mean, you know, it wasn't a meeting, and so I accept that. I don't accept that we were, I can't remember your exact words, and so I'll probably defend ourselves against any accusation of being obstructive, or what was the other word?
Well, you used the word obstructive. I merely said you were. You were the one that used the word obstructive.
No, I think that's, well, I mean, so let's wait.
If we come back to that, that's the purpose for saying it the way we've drafted it there. So it's to actually assist in, if there are things to be clarified, then either of the groups or the whole RPC, if it wanted to, if it was meeting, could request further information, but at least it doesn't delay the request for information being
Yeah, and so just from a staff perspective, it's useful to know in terms of, and I know we don't want to get bogged down in process, but in terms of a request, an informal request, what is the process for a request? Because some of these reports can consume an enormous amount of staff time.
Well, maybe it comes through each of the co-chairs. So if you got a request from Toro on behalf of the tangata whenua members, or on behalf of Rex, on behalf of the councillors, is that what you're looking for, to understand who it's coming from?
Yes, and will staff have any opportunity to maybe discuss the rationale and the process, and perhaps give some feedback on the request?
Yeah, sure.
Would the request still progress?
So, Annalie, you're clearing the crossouts on the rest of those?
Yep. Yeah. I think that's just to the chair. I think that's a really interesting point, because we could have
need to come back in.
Some individuals who want to have further information, and it could be endless. And so there does need to be a winnowing process. There needs to be clarity about it and engagement, because this could go on forever. And I think that's as part of this is we don't need to put it in the resolution as long as it's clearly understood that any request on behalf of the tangata whenua is to come from the chair, co-chair of the tangata whenua group, or the co-chair of the councillors to the chief executive on behalf of the staff to be discussed at that point. If it's either the request for further information is clarified, accepted, or rejected. We then move on from there.
Can I just share a caution here that if there's information that other members of the committee might like to receive, I would really like to be part of that receiving as well, because the way we need to understand each other is just working across the table. So the more we are as a team, the more important it is in getting consensus anywhere along this journey.
And I think Debbie's point is that once the information is supplied, it's supplied to all members of the RPC.
The challenge is getting it agreed to in order to supply it. That's been the problem.
Well, you're going to have to rely on Toro and I's discretion there, and we'll have to talk about it, because it's not my intention to have this last the next 5 years that I'm sitting here. But we've got to be, a whole bunch of people have done a whole bunch of work, and they've given it to us, and we're either going to have some trust in mana whenua and the community or not. So I look forward to seeing whether we do. Or not, so I'm happy to have this go in. Look, we've got a mover. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second.
Tania will second. I'm sick of a conversation on it. Do you want to talk about it?
Well, I'm the member, aren't I?
Yeah, I know. You are mover, but just want to move into them.
Well, sorry, Annalie, can you get rid of 1 and 2 and just put 3 on the screen? Because that's what we're dealing with now.
No, we've already passed 1 and 2.
We've dealt with 1 and 2.
Just wanted to
Well, I want to see 3, and it's total up there.
But it is.
Now, so take out the crossouts on 3.3, 3.4, and 3.5 and 3.6. Okay. So that's it.
Yep.
All right, I'll speak to her now.
Thank you, Alan.
I think that gives us a way forward, and whilst I can sympathise in a sense with Councillor Barker's frustration about the time that these things take, getting the starting point right is important for us to move on in a logical way. I've got a bit of a concern about tangata whenua and council members being separated and requests for reports being brought in effect independently and outside of the decision-making role of this committee. But for the sake of getting things moving, I'm prepared to swallow that. So I'll support it as it stands.
Who's our seconder? Oh, Tania, sorry, Tania, you have to speak.
Kia ora tātou. I think it's really important to understand that this is the first real plan change that's come to the RPC. Speaking for myself as a tangata whenua rep, I see it as my obligation to really understand what we're agreeing to here. We're not trying to be obstructive, we're trying to understand what we're doing. And if we need further information to help us do that so we actually can make a decision in a good, timely manner, then that's what our job is to do. We're not here to be obstructive. It may well be that if we've done all our research right and if I'm sure the Tank Collaborative Group has looked at issues ad nauseum, that if we've requested some information, I would expect 9 times out of 10 that that information is buried somewhere in one of those many documents in Schedule 5 or Appendix 5 that would need to be brought forward to help us understand or resolve an issue. So I don't think we should see it as obstructive, but trying to understand what we're agreeing to. That's our job. So that's why I tautoko that amendment to Clause 3, Recommendation 3.
Any other speakers?
Just a question. I'm always very nervous about et ceteras, and I just wonder why the drafter of this has got et cetera on 3.5. It's very poor drafting. So what does it mean? Doesn't it take it out?
Anyone else you can choose?
Yeah, take it out. I hate it too.
Take it out, et cetera.
You have to take it out, etc.
Paul, we take it out, et cetera.
Thank you, Chair. I have to admit that I thought it was a little strange that we've split the tangata whenua and council members apart, but at the end of the day, to my mind, just having a think about it, if we're going to build genuine partnership between the council and tangata whenua members, as we have to under the treaty, there's got to be a huge element of trust between the parties, and I'm inclined to agree with what Tania said about the intention is not to be obstructive, so I have to trust that, and I do. So I'm supportive of what the request is.
Somebody else had their hand up here. Okay, no more questions. We have a mover or speakers. We're moving a seconder. All those in favour? Aye. It's passed. Thank you very much. We will move out of our meeting, I guess. We'll move out of our formal meeting now into the workshop.
I won't remind him.
So thank you very much. We will,
What are we doing?
oh, sorry. Sit down, Rick. Can you sit down for a second? Can I...
Piggly 2, Piggly 3.
What's everyone's point of view? Do we have a general mandate that we... Rick, just pause for a second and listen.
Answer a very important question here.
Are we going to stay in the public arena or are we going to go into a private session? I move that we stay in the public arena. Tom, will you all second it?
I will second that.
Any speakers against that? Therefore, we'll take a vote. All those in favour? Aye. Against? We'll stay public. We'll stop for a cup of tea.
It's okay, 60 minutes better.